In the quiet hours of the early morning, when the world was still wrapped in a blanket of sleep, Daniel Ascend sat at his kitchen table, staring at the cold remnants of yesterday's coffee. The sunlight trickled through the window, casting a gentle glow over the scattered papers and half-finished sketches that littered the surface. It was a scene that had become all too familiar for him, a reminder of dreams once vibrant, now dulled by the relentless passage of time. Each day felt like a monotonous cycle, a loop of waking up, trudging to work, engaging in conversations that felt hollow, and returning home to a silence that echoed his own frustrations. Daniel had once been filled with ambition, the kind that made his heart race with excitement. He had imagined a life where creativity flowed effortlessly, where he would design spaces that inspired and uplifted. But somewhere along the way, the doors to that life began to close. His job at the architecture firm had become stagnant, a series of uninspired projects that drained his enthusiasm. The relationships he cherished began to crumble under the weight of unspoken words and unmet expectations. Friends drifted away, partners became distant, and the vibrant tapestry of his life faded to shades of grey. As he sat there, the weight of his circumstances pressed heavily on his chest. He felt like a spectator in his own life, watching as opportunities slipped through his fingers. He often found himself in conversations with friends, lamenting the unfairness of it all. "If only my boss recognized my talent," he would say. "If only my partner understood me." It was always someone else's fault, always an external force that held him back. But deep down, a flicker of awareness began to stir within him, a whisper that perhaps the real barrier was not the world around him, but the mindset he had adopted. One fateful morning, as the sun bathed the room in warmth, Daniel experienced a moment of clarity that would change everything. He had been scrolling through social media, where he stumbled upon a quote from an old mentor. "The moment you stop blaming others is the moment you start reclaiming your power." Those words struck him like a bolt of lightning. He realized that he had been living in a state of victimhood, allowing circumstances to define him rather than taking ownership of his life. The epiphany was both liberating and terrifying. It was time to face the truth. In that moment, Daniel made a choice. He decided to stop waiting for someone else to save him, and instead look inward. He began to accept reality as it was, not as he wished it to be. He acknowledged the stagnation in his work, the distance in his relationships, and the dimming of his dreams. This acceptance was not an act of defeat. It was the first step toward transformation. Daniel understood that life was not about the cards he had been dealt, but how he played them. With a newfound sense of responsibility, Daniel committed to rewriting his story. He started small, setting daily intentions and goals. He dusted off his sketchbook and began to draw again, allowing his creativity to flow without the pressure of perfection. Each stroke of the pencil felt like a reclaiming of his identity, a statement that he was still an artist, still capable of creating beauty. He reached out to old friends, initiating conversations that had long been left unsaid. The vulnerability was daunting, but with each interaction, he felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crumble. As weeks turned into months, Daniel noticed a shift within himself. He began to think differently, to act boldly. He took on new projects at work, proposing ideas that once seemed too ambitious. He sought feedback, not as a means to validate himself, but as a tool for growth. The fear of rejection still lingered, but it no longer paralyzed him. Instead, it fueled his determination. He realized that successful individuals were not those who never faced adversity, but those who embraced it, who learned to dance in the rain rather than waiting for the storm to pass. One evening, as he stood in front of a canvas, paintbrush in hand, Daniel felt a surge of courage. He was no longer just an architect. He was an artist reclaiming his narrative. The vibrant colors he mixed reflected his journey, a journey of courage, resilience, and growth. He painted not just for himself, but for anyone who felt trapped in their own story, anyone who believed that every door was closing. He wanted to convey the message that transformation begins within. With each brushstroke, Daniel began to envision a future filled with possibilities. He imagined a life where he was not defined by his past failures, but by his willingness to embrace change. The fear of the unknown still lingered, but it was now accompanied by a sense of hope. He understood that life was not a straight path, but a winding road filled with twists and turns, each moment an opportunity to learn and grow. As he stepped back to admire his work, Daniel posed a question to himself. Would he continue living the same story, or would he embrace the chance to begin a new chapter? The answer was clear. He would choose growth over surrender, belief over doubt. He would no longer allow the narrative of his life to be dictated by external circumstances. Instead, he would become the author of his own journey, rewriting the script with every choice he made. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it without its challenges. There were days when self-doubt crept back in, when the shadows of his past loomed large. But in those moments, Daniel remembered the courage he had cultivated, the strength that came from taking responsibility for his life. He learned to embrace discomfort, to see it as a sign of growth rather than a barrier. He surrounded himself with individuals who inspired him, who challenged him to think bigger and bolder. In time, the doors that had once felt closed began to creak open. New opportunities emerged, relationships deepened, and dreams that had once seemed distant began to take shape. Daniel discovered that life was not about achieving a final destination, but about the journey of believing in oneself, of deserving something better and more profound. He found joy in the process, in the act of creating, and in the connections he fostered along the way. Daniel Ascend had transformed from a man weighed down by circumstances into a beacon of inspiration. He embodied the spirit of courage, reminding others that they too had the power to rewrite their stories. Life was a canvas, and each individual held the brush. The choice was theirs, to remain stagnant or to embrace the vibrant colors of possibility. As he gazed at his latest painting, a burst of colors that represented his journey, Daniel smiled. He had chosen to believe in himself, to embrace the beauty of growth, and to face the truth of his life with courage. The narrative of his life was no longer defined by closed doors, but by the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Each day was a new chapter waiting to be written, and he was ready to pen it with intention and passion.